Hi, I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Sophie, and we are here to help guide you to the why behind your wellness why.
Come join us on our journey.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wellness Wise podcast today. Chelsea and I have a wonderful guest, one of our clients, Molly. I started working with Molly a little over 2 years ago. I met her through her dad, and she wanted to start working out in the gym with her sister, which is super fun. And then she wanted to take it a little further and started working with Chelsea.
Sophie and I absolutely love working with you, and we appreciate you hopping on today. And so we just want to give a glimpse to everybody listening, a little inside look from a client to show their side of what it's like to work with a personal trainer and a dietitian and what they've gotten out of it and just the course of all of that. So thanks again for coming on today.
Yeah, I'm super excited. And for anyone who doesn't finish the full episode, working with a personal trainer and a dietitian, you get a lot from it. So it's pretty good.
I love that you put that in right at the beginning.
I agree.
Okay, so we wrote up some questions for Molly just to help guide the conversation a little bit. So let's just start off with the first one. You started working with Sophie first. So what sparked your interest in working with a personal trainer? And then what led to wanting to work with a dietitian?
So I'm going to kind of take us back to my high school. And even before that in grade school. My background was I ran cross country in high school, which was more of a way to do something after school, meet people. I was never super involved in it. I never loved it a ton, which is kind of ironic now to think about where I've come from that. But I never kind of had an understanding of how to use my body or use weights in the gym. I know my high school gym classes, they often taught like different exercises, how to use the machines in the gym. And to be quite honest, it's so overwhelming. And I think it's super scary for a lot of first timers in the gym, especially women. So I think I wanted to be with a personal trainer because not only are you like learning how to do the exercises, you're learning how to do it properly and well, but you're also learning, and Sophie's so good at this, of like teaching how to like put the weights on in a certain way so that you don't like, you know, hurt yourself or hurt other people. So I think it was just getting comfortable in the gym was super important to me to begin with, just because I never had that experience. And it made it like, I think one of the best parts of working with a personal trainer and with Sophie is because I like the confidence I grew being in the gym when there's like 20 guys around you and you're like this 24-year-old girl. It's super helpful to know, like, I know what I'm doing. I know how to handle myself. As I was transitioning out of college, it made me have like kind of a structure and a schedule around working out, when in college it was way more like, oh, there's a fun, workout class I'm gonna go with my friends. And that was like so much more ad hoc. So I think having to be like every week I'm working out with Sophie and my sister, like that's on our calendars all the time, was super helpful to like bring me from being someone who knew nothing about the gym, was probably a little scared of it, to someone who like is super comfortable there, knows how to do, the exercises that are working for me and work best for me. That was awesome. It was like such a big transition. And I also feel like the support you get from a personal trainer, like I remember telling Sophie the first time we trained together, she was like, she had little like, keep going, one last rep, that kind of thing. And I feel like even those little things of like helping to gain confidence in those ways can also help, because I started this for like mental health and wanting to lose weight in some respects, but it's also like having someone in your corner can be so beneficial. And then again, that kind of feeds directly into working with Chelsea, the dietitian, is that I was working out once a week with Sophie, which was probably, it does something, it moves your body, it helps with your mental health. It's super important, but it probably like wasn't enough. And I had wanted to kind of take a step further, as Sophie had mentioned, like I wanted to understand, I'm moving my body, I'm gaining muscle, but like, how can I take it farther? And I also think I started working with Chelsea at probably a pretty low point when I was struggling a lot with like my body, with mental health. And so, I mean, we talk about this so much. Chelsea is like the role that like nutrition and health in general, whether that's like mental, physical, emotional, plays like such a role altogether. So I think having someone in your corner that's saying like, let's get back to the basics. Like, are you sleeping enough? Are you eating enough? What are you putting in your body? Like, how are you connecting all those pieces? So I guess the main points of it is that I came to Sophie wanting to understand how to be in the gym. And then I came to Chelsea wanting to like lose weight, but also like have a holistic look at my health. Because I said this to Chelsea before, at that point in my life, I didn't feel like I was in equilibrium. Like parts of my health were kind of misaligned, and it felt like I wasn't in my right like weight, and I didn't feel good in my body, and I wanted to feel like more empowered because I was like gaining strength, but it wasn't in the ways that I wanted, I think, at first.
Thank you for sharing that. And I know Sophie and I both love working with you because you love to learn too. And I think that that's what's so fun for both of us because A, we get to nerd out a little bit with you. So that's fun. But B, kind of like you were saying, you had multiple goals, which we'll get that into that in a second. But it's you were coming to us wanting to understand a lot of different things, not just one goal. And I think a lot of people, especially with a trainer or a dietitian, there's so much around like weight loss or gaining muscle or something like that. And I don't want to dismiss that at all because I think there's validity in having physical goals, but kind of like you've learned, there's so much more to it than just having a physical goal. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And I guess one of the things I'll add is when you're talking about like the non-physical goals is that my sister has also worked with Chelsea. We're big fans of this duo. So when she started working with Chelsea, we were kind of uncovering together like how we both viewed food and viewed like health in general because we grew up in the same house. We, you know, had very similar backgrounds, right? So we were like kind of teasing apart eating habits and nutrition and like understanding like, oh, like that may be maybe an abnormal way to look at food and nutrition versus how Chelsea's saying like there's no bad foods, there's maybe it's how you're eating it, how you're looking at it. Like that's what can be the bad part. It's not the food's not bad, it's how you're relating to the food that can be like difficult or hard on you. So in the same way that that's not like a physical body goal, it was like a goal to be unafraid or disconnected from like the bad emotions surrounding food in general too.
Yeah, absolutely.
My favorite thing is the confidence gain. I love it all, but like, because I was once there, right? People think I feel like I was never there, but like I was also like this teeny little thing in high school and college and like, ooh, the weights are scary. Like there's boys over there and it's so easy. Like once you get it, like you cannot lose it. And it is such a good, nice feeling. And it is so nice watching someone else gain that.
And being able to apply it. I think that's the big takeaway too that you just mentioned is
Yeah.
like you said, like once you gain it, it's kind of like riding a bike. I mean, I don't want to say it's like that, but it's like once you gain that knowledge, it's you have it. It's a lifelong thing. And not to say like again, your goals are going to maybe change and maybe you'll get to a point of not knowing what to do with something, but you have that foundation now in both personal training and nutrition too.
Totally.
So that brings us to how Molly's goals may have changed with time with working with us, which I know a little bit of the answer and I love it because part of our podcast is your why and how your why can change and how it's okay for things to change. So take it away, Molly.
So I kind of alluded to this before because I said I ran cross country, and that's funny now because I hated it when I was 16. But then as a 24-year-old woman, I was like, let's run a half marathon this year. Like, let's see how that works. And that's not at all where I came to Sophie with. My goal first coming to Sophie was I want to have any muscle on my body. I want to be able to be comfortable in the gym. So it was like starting at kind of the bare minimum. And then I think it was November of 2022. I was thinking like, I'm kind of thinking of running a half marathon. Like, what would that look like? And Sophie obviously has a huge background in running. So it was honestly like the best of both worlds. She was like, well, let's start with 20 minutes and we'll increase from there. and we increased to 13.1 miles. So that was obviously a huge goal change throughout I guess that was maybe the second year we've been working together. And now since that's been done, that's also like another adjustment that we've made is focusing on pull-ups and push-ups, which Sophie knows this, but I now regret asking those as a goal because they're really hard. But
Never.
I know I'm getting stronger, so it's good. So yeah, it was, and throughout that, I don't feel like it's ever been like Sophie, I want to have more confidence in the gym, but that's always been something probably that we've talked about. And it's been like an underlying idea that we've always kind of mentioned. Like I'll text Sophie, it was probably like one of the third or fourth times I was working out in the gym I go to by myself. And I was like, there's a guy taking the seat that I need. And I'm kind of scared to ask. And she's like, well, ask him. It's totally fine. Like ask to work in. And I did. And to be honest, it didn't really go that well. But
I remember.
The next time it was easier. So again, like there's that kind of thread of confidence throughout, which has always been really helpful. So that is with kind of the physical goals. And then with Chelsea, I feel like these goals changed probably a lot more between, I think now it's 2 or maybe a year, maybe 2 years we've been working together because it was kind of a break in the middle. But we started with probably the main focus of losing weight. And I know we've kind of mentioned this before, that it wasn't always like a numbers, it wasn't pounds focused. It was more like, I feel uncomfortable in how my body is like feeling, how it's fitting in the clothes that I know like makes sense to my body. Like it felt like I said before, I felt out of equilibrium. I knew I was like overeating. So that was leading to these feelings of discomfort. Like if I was eating healthy meals and eating kind of when I was hungry and at appropriate times and enough food, but not like being overfull, I'd be like, that's my equilibrium. I'm there. That's the weight I'm comfortable with, no matter what it says on a scale. But I didn't feel that comfort. So kind of we came at it first with that losing weight and understanding, using the intuitive eating principles to understand how to lose weight. And Chelsea, I'm sure you've talked about this before, but a lot of what we've talked about is it's not only intuitive eating, we kind of use like the science behind it as well. So intuitive eating would probably tell me after working out, I'm not super hungry, because after you work out, like your body's kind of still in workout mode. So it's like, you're not really hungry yet, but we know kind of from the science behind it, you need to refuel afterwards. So it's a lot of learning those techniques to begin with, and still learning. Like I pulled that book out 2 weeks ago because I was having a bad week. So those goals always kind of come back. That also came very closely, I talked about this before a little bit, but talking more about like ideas and thoughts around food and learning kind of what I deem based on like my family's history, based on like, I don't know, society in general, just what I saw as like good and bad foods. Again, that's something we had to kind of like learn and continue to learn, because it will continually pop up and so many interactions that I have. We talked about sleeping habits and schedule. That has been like a big one for me to understand, because as I was working out more, I was getting up at like 5:30 in the morning. So I had to make sure that, you know, I was taking care of my like sleep schedule. I can't go to bed at like midnight and wake up at 5 every day of the week. I would be exhausted. So there was a lot of like understanding kind of holistic health in that sense. And I think those goals will honestly continue to change. They have changed. They will continue to change. During the time, obviously, Chelsea and I had to figure out how I could fuel for like endurance training during the half marathon, which was probably its own struggle and challenge, because as I was learning intuitive eating habits, I also had to learn like, I might not be starving, but I kind of need to carb load before 12-mile run tomorrow. Like there was a lot of kind of navigating that, and the aspect, and kind of the example that jumps in my head is like, we always kind of want like a lot of macronutrients in a meal, right? So we want like multigrain and colorful vegetables and fats and all those things on your plate. But then we had to say, okay, maybe you can't have the quinoa pasta. You need just like straight whole or white pasta, which is not what we were working towards before, because before it was weight loss. So there was, I feel like in the nutrition and like dietitian side, there was probably a larger influx of changes in the goals, because it had to adjust like in each life stage, in each even season. Chelsea and I know we've talked about that so much. Like after Christmas, we're like, okay, we're starting a new year. Like, how do we figure this out? Or during the holidays, that was always a huge goal. Like, so much of the holidays is eating and it's so good, but how do you navigate that? So there was a lot of goals, and I ran through so many of them. So that's a taste of them. And I'm sorry if I rattled so many off, but I know that there was kind of each month we would, or each season, we'd be talking about something different and working towards a new way of thinking and practicing kind of new techniques for my health in general, but a lot of my eating.
I think it's good to talk about having a lot of different goals, kind of like what Sophie was saying, with what we've talked about through our podcast, but even just to give an insight as to like, it's okay for your goals to change. And from a nutrition standpoint, a couple of things that you had pointed out that I think is really, really important for people to understand is, and this is why I always talk about like, there shouldn't be a blanket statement, and like social media, there's so many pros to it, but like when it comes to nutrition, it's so difficult because it does change. Like your nutrition, what you should be doing for your nutrition is going to change depending on what your goal is, what your lifestyle is like, what your medical history is. And so it's so hard for me as a dietitian to see stuff on social media where people are like, everybody do this, everybody take this, everybody needs to do this. And I'm like, oh, like that's a reach. Yes, it's probably good for a lot of people, but there's also like times and places and stuff. Something else that I think that you intertwined that you don't usually hear of a lot in the nutrition is what you're talking about with like weight loss, but also intuitive eating. And there's like all of these terms thrown around, and that's a controversy in itself. And quite honestly, I'm kind of the controversy, because usually you see with dietitians, you see dietitians on like left field where it's like macronutrients and numbers and calories and metrics and all this type of stuff. And then you see dietitians on the right field that's more of like intuitive eating, listen to your body positivity. It doesn't matter what the scale says, like it doesn't matter what size you are, all of this type of stuff. And I feel like you're a great example of, we have worked right in that middle. Like you had mentioned, okay, we're not putting the scale first, but like, you're uncomfortable in your body, and you came to me not feeling in that wow, I can't say that word, equilibrium that you had mentioned. And so, okay, we weren't in that left field of like counting calories or counting numbers or focusing so much on your metrics, but we were taking like your wellness history and your physical goals and stuff into play, while also being in tune with your hunger cues and your feelings and your emotions and all that type of stuff. So I know, again, on social media, there's a lot out there about like, no, be on this side, or no, be on this side. And at the end of the day, like, it's okay to be in the middle, and it's okay to be in that area where you're doing different things, because all humans are a little bit different. So just wanted to throw that out there.
And I also want to say I love what Molly said, because I feel like I just had a thought of, if a newer person walks into a gym or a dietitian's office, it's good when your goals change, because that means you're open-minded and you're learning like these different things that are going to work for you as an individual, and not, like Chelsea said, like this blanket statement. Like, I feel like it's so good to, be open-minded and educate yourself and figure out what works for you. And it might take trial and error and trying different things and doing different things. And like with the seasons, like you said, is so good, because the year is so long. Like, you're allowed to change your mind on things. We don't have to be stuck.
Yeah. And you grow as a person, like even in a year. I mean, think about it, how much can change from different things in even just like a year period of time. So that's what I've said before. Like, some peers are like, oh, how long do you work with clients? And I'm like, sometimes years, because they're going through different transitions. The amount of women that I've worked with through dating someone, to getting engaged to that person, to getting married, to then pregnancy, to then switching jobs, like because think about your nutrition and your exercise in every single one of those moments, like even just changing a job, like you might be working different hours, you might need to be grocery shopping differently, you might just because of like your time. And so I think that's what a lot of people think, like whether it be with a personal trainer or a dietitian or really any health professional, that there has to be like the start and end date. And absolutely, like there's definitely some people, like I've also worked with some people who are like, hey, I want to work on nutrition for the marathon, and that's it. And that's why they're seeing me. And that's completely okay too. But there's a lot of individuals that could really benefit from working with people in different phases of their life because their life has changed, because their goals have changed. And Molly, I think you mentioned this a little bit, but you're a really great example of like, you have paused and come back, and that's totally okay too. I think some individuals, when they stop working with a health professional, they feel like if they come back, because I've heard this from other clients, like, what did I do wrong? Like, did I fail? Like why am I needing to work with you again? Like I feel like I'm starting over. And I always have to remind people, no, that's not the case. You're working on, even if you're working on the same thing, it's probably because your life is a little bit different and you're in a little bit of a different place. And that's perfectly okay. That's we grow as humans. If you're not growing as a human, then that's when I would question it.
Molly, what have you learned so far working with Chelsea and I? Like just a few things, whatever you think are some pro tips that people can learn.
It's kind of funny because the first one I wrote, I feel like is just the essence of your whole podcast, which is essentially understanding the why of why you're doing anything in your health is super important. And honestly, I think that's so important for me because when I was like, especially for like, let's say the half marathon, the beginning of that, I was like, I'm so pumped. This is great. And it was like 6 months away, right? So you're so excited. And then when I got into it, I was like, this kind of sucks. Like my Friday nights are me preparing to run 8 miles the next morning or 10 miles the next morning. But in all reality, like going back to the why of me being like, I'm wanting to see what my body can do. This one, I'm like not testing it, but you're challenging yourself. So I'm coming back to the why. And right before I ran the marathon, I checked my phone and looked at the why to like remember why I signed up for it in the first place, like what drove me to this. And it's probably the same thing when I don't want to work out right now, or I'm having trouble getting up in the morning to do that. I will often, text my sister. I'm like, oh, I forgot to work out. She's like, that's fine. Why do you want to work out? Well, she'll always kind of ask that. And I said, well, because I know I need like the mental break. I want the endorphins. I want to feel all the happy feelings. So coming back to that why, understanding maybe the emotions behind why I'm eating so much, or why I'm not hungry, or why I am hungry, or why I'm anxiously eating. Like the why is just so important, and it drives so much of it. And taking care of your body and like understanding what it needs. I think it's kind of like an intuitive eating thing. It's like understanding the why, but it's like intuitive, like nutrition, I guess, kind of holistically. So that would probably be the first. The next was learning that this is going to be like a long-term sustainable habit change. I know that's something, Chelsea, like we always talk about this, but just because as like an anecdote, one time I was talking to my therapist because I have a trio of women in my life that run all aspects of my health.
We love it.
We were talking about, I was really frustrated because I was having a bad like body image week. And I was like, I really wanted to work out this morning, but I was super tired and I couldn't get out of bed. And I was kind of beating myself up about it. And she kind of paused and she asked me, she's like, Molly, like, are you doing a 30-day challenge? Like one day in your life in 24 years is not going to matter. Like you're doing this as a long-term habit for your health in general, specifically my mental health, because that's always been a struggle for me. And this is like one of the best ways to take care of that. But this is kind of the why too, is like her grounding me that this is like my lifelong habit of taking care of my body and working out and eating right. Not, let's not to shit on the 75-day challenge or whatever they are, like they're great ways to get people started, but it really is, it's like, it's a long-term habit that you want to stick with. And we talked about it before, like seasons change. This summer was probably a little less connected to being in the gym because I was outside and I was walking and I was running more and I was traveling more. But again, it's not like it's going away. It's just in different forms, right? I'm working out with my sister up at our lake cabin with like the few dumbbells that we have, not being able to do like the workout routine I want. So that's the other part. It's a long-term habit. And that's how you like can stick with it, is knowing that it's going to ebb and flow, but it's always kind of going to be that like consistent thing in your life. And then this is probably the most kind of tactical thing I've learned from the two of you, which is probably about like fueling and then exercise, specifically running, because fueling for endurance, I think, is really difficult to think about because your body needs so much. Like you're using so much like sugar and carbs in your body, and that can feel really scary. And like, I guess it felt really scary to me of you're clearly using a lot of calories. You're clearly, depleted after running certain amounts. How do you refuel? How do you do it beforehand? Because yes, there are, I guess, like not races, but competitions for weightlifting. I'm not really interested in those. I was interested in races and I wanted to like show up as my best self. And I wanted to get to race day having like practiced the things that were going to make me succeed. That was the biggest thing for me to learn, is realizing that it's something that I don't know, and it's okay because I can learn from you too. But it was just like a kind of a bigger hurdle than I think I expected to, and being okay with not knowing and having to ask the questions, because it was such a long process and I needed to kind of build up to those things, and having the safe space to do that, I think, was really important. So that's the final one.
I love it. And let me tell you that Molly's really good at Excel, and she makes a really pretty running and lifting calendar. And I was lucky enough to look at it, edit it. It was a lot of fun. And I will say, like, we shifted from, because Molly and I were doing once a week, and then she was doing twice a week of homework that I gave her. And we switched to doing 2 lifts a week and then more runs at that time, which was great. It was what her body needed at the time.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I forgot about our Excel. Still use it to this day because I injured myself while doing the half marathons. We had to get me back into running now. So yes.
I remember when you came to me saying that you wanted to run a half marathon, and like you were like so driven and wanting to learn. Like, I love that you want to learn. And I was like, okay, let's take a step back. So I remember you were like, okay, what do I eat the morning of my race? And I was like, oh, we haven't even started training yet. let's take it back a little bit. But I just loved it because you're just like so eager to learn. And I think we've already talked about how goals change, but I think the 2 examples that you just gave with like the long-term sustainable habits versus something like training for a half marathon or training for any type of event, I think that's a really good example of like a long-term goal and a short-term goal, and showing how you can kind of be working, as you had mentioned, like, okay, yes, when we were looking at the half marathon stuff, yes, we were, I would say, maybe more focused on that, but it's not like everything else that you learned went out of the window. It just shifted for a little bit. And then we shifted it a little bit again after your half marathon, but it wasn't this like black and white of like, oh, now you're doing this, you can't do that. It was just shifting to a new goal that you were doing, which I think is cool.
Yeah, same in the gym.
Yeah. Some of these things you've already talked about, but anything that you feel like has changed in your day-to-day life since working with us? Any pro tips that you've learned that has changed in your day-to-day life that you want to share with others?
Yeah, these are kind of short and sweet. For me, I'll list 3 of them. So the first is remembering the small things. I said this before. It's like hydration, sleep. Those things will like set you up for success, because you can be in the gym every day, but if you're not like drinking water, eating enough protein, like that's not going to be good, and it's probably going to hurt you like overall if you're like sleep deprived but you're like lifting weights. That seems like a recipe for disaster. The next is the mind body connection in working out, which I mean, or you could say mind body and like nutrition too, but specifically for lifting, I think when Sophie like reminds me, she's like, remember, this is like your glute, or like this should be your hamstring. I'm like, oh, okay. And you kind of like, not that it's not engaged, but it's like a re-engagement kind of, and you're just more focused on that muscle. And especially when I'm by myself, I really try to remember that because there's not someone doing it for me and reminding me. So that I think can make such a big difference in how you feel in exercise, and how you can feel it kind of a little bit more. And the last one is something Sophie said to me when I was telling her I had a terrible run. And she said, well, not all of them can be good because then they'd all be the same. Like you have to have some bad runs, some bad workouts to feel the good ones. So like you're kind of getting the bad run out the way before race day, for example. So if I have like a terrible run right before my race, I'm like, great, now my race day is going to be good. So remembering that when I have a really bad workout, or when I have like a meal that I was like, that was terrible, I didn't like how I felt during it, I didn't like whatever it might be, there's always the next one. And it's kind of like, all right, it's kind of putting it behind you without it letting it be like a dark cloud over every other workout you have that week or every other meal you're having that week too.
Which how many of us are guilty for being like, oh, that workout sucked, it just ruins the week, or like, oh, I already ate this for a meal, I'll start next Monday. Like the amount of times Sophie and I have both heard, okay, I'll start on Monday, with both working out and nutrition. So thank you for sharing that. That's a really good point to make.
It's never going to be perfectly linear. It would be boring.
Exactly.
It's definitely not linear.
No. Hey, but that's life too. So, Okay, our last question that we have is, what do you feel are the benefits of having multiple health professionals on your team? I know for some individuals that feels really overwhelming. Like you had mentioned, you work with a therapist, you work with Sophie, you work with myself. So walk through some of the benefits, and has there been a time where it just like has felt like very overwhelming to have all these health professionals in your corner and on your team?
Yeah. I think Chelsea mentioned this before of like social media and the internet. Like there's so much information at our fingertips, which is amazing, but it's also kind of terrible because then you have to vet everything. And great, I have a science background, I can look at who wrote the paper, but I can't compare it to 3 other papers and check where they went to school. So it's just nice to have someone and people who have like knowledge and background and understanding to kind of teach you, because it lets them kind of do some of the research. Maybe I've done some of it, but I'm saying, hey, can you tell me if this is right or wrong? Am I looking at it the right way? So it helps me to like trust the information I'm getting. So that's, I think, the first part, that it's super nice to have people that like I trust and are in my corner and will give me like honest feedback and real research and information that I need when I have questions or I need that information. The second part, and I've mentioned that too, like I have a therapist, so I have this like trio of women in my life that keep me on track for all of wellness. And I think you're right, Chelsea. Like I think sometimes it can be very overwhelming where it's like, I have like 3 appointments this week because they're all landing in the same week. And that's a lot of like my outside time that I'm spending doing these things. But I felt like it continues to be a check-in. It continues to kind of be like, these are my goals. Am I actually doing them? Like it makes me check in with myself and keeps me accountable to someone else. And like showing up every week for Sophie, I'm sure she sees it on my face, and I've said it to her before. I'm like, I don't really want to be here today. Like work kind of sucked. It's only Tuesday. Like, are you serious? Right. But in the end, afterwards, like it's always going to feel better. And it's nice that it's just consistent. Like people, my colleagues, my friends, they're like, can you see me on Tuesday? They don't even ask me anymore because they know that that's like where I'm going to be. So having that consistency of it being like, I know I'm getting at least one lift in this week, or I know I'm going to be able to talk to Chelsea about this like major thing that's coming up. Even if I haven't had the mental capacity elsewhere to talk about it, I know I'm going to be able to check in with these people. And I will say, like, I think you both are super available to me, whether that's like good or bad, or you want it or not. I think that's like such a benefit that I've gained. Is I remember this last year, like I came to Chelsea at like a really difficult time in my life. And I was going to a tailgate, which I was like, oh God, this is my nightmare. There's so much social interaction. There's so much food, like literally everywhere you go, you're going to be drinking. So you're eating more, all those types of things. So I just was super scared of the whole situation. And I texted her and I was like, do you just have like any, like, give me any parting wisdom? I just need something to like kind of focus on. And that was like a Saturday morning, right? And she responded and gave me just some things to think about to like ground me. And I think, like I said, those check-ins and that throughout the day, I remember that you sent me like a photo and kind of throughout the day, it was like, I kind of referred to it, right? It's something about like wellness is a long-term, kind of what I said, it's a long-term thing that one margarita is not going to change you. It's not going to take you off track. So being able to check in, I think, has always been really beneficial.
Do you mind sharing? You mentioned already when you see Sophie, but like how often do you see your therapist and how often do you see me, just to give someone maybe who's listening who doesn't work with anybody, make it seem not so overwhelming where like you actually have an appointment every single day with 3 different people type of thing. Walk us through the timeline of that.
Yeah. So when I see Sophie every Tuesday, and then I see, at first Chelsea and I did, I think, every week, and then that lessened to a different cadence of, I think it's every 2 weeks, so it's twice a month. And then I see my therapist once a week, which I've been doing for a very long time. Like that has always been a standing appointment, and I like it every week. Sometimes she'll be like, how about in 2 weeks? I'm like, no, I want it next week. I want to talk to you. But I think a lot of people with therapy will do it ad hoc as they need it. But I've found that it's like most beneficial to me to do it every week. So
yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that helps because, I mean, as Sophie knows, and as you know, and as I know, meeting with health professionals can look a lot different. So as you mentioned, like someone might meet with a therapist more or less. Same with me. I have clients that I see weekly. I have clients that I see every other week. I have clients that I see once a month. I have some clients that I see once a quarter, just depending on what their needs are. So, and with Sophie, I know you see individuals all different amounts too. So if someone is listening to this and doesn't know what that looks like, there isn't really a cookie cutter answer because it can look like a lot of different things and it can change. Just like you were meeting with me weekly at the beginning, and then you were feeling really confident and we went down to every other week, and that's been working for us, but it can always change depending on what happens in life too. Do you want to add anything else, Sophie? Are we missing anything?
I love Molly. Molly's the best.
I love the lady pod. I love all of my wellness ladies. So
I feel like I should add, because we didn't really mention this, like when Chelsea and I share a client and like the goals change and everything, like Chelsea and I will talk based on that, like, which is great. That's how it should be.
Yeah. And that's a good point too. I feel like because you guys work together and know each other, like it kind of streamlined everything. And I know, Chelsea, when we first started working together, you were like offering to speak with my therapist too, because again, it's like also interconnected. And I think it's super nice that it can be connected in a way that would be beneficial to me, like not to make it all about me, but it kind of is for all of us. So
yeah, absolutely. It totally is, in a good way, obviously. And yeah, I'm glad you added that, Sophie, because I think that's what's so important. I mean, of course, we get your permission first. Like, we're not just like behind your back chatting about everything. But I think that for
oh my God, Molly.
but I do think that's important. If someone is comfortable with that, I do feel like that can just take the health professionals that you work with to the next level, because then you really are a team versus just like you feel like you have to tell this person this, and then it's just, you know, this hamster wheel almost. So having, I mean, I'm not saying not having health professionals that aren't like that is a bad thing. But I do think if you're able to find a group of people that can, at least a couple of them, connect with each other, it can just really help in the long run with everything.
Yeah, it really does.
And as we say, the more you share, the more we can help you, the farther you can go.
And I'll add that, my last thing I'll add is that is what I am so appreciative of, Molly. Like I had mentioned, not only do you want to learn, but I feel like you are so open with what is going on with both of us. Like you said, like you don't try to put on a happy face and go into the gym when you don't want to. Like you're straightforward with that. With me, you've come on calls and you've been like, it's been a really shitty week, and you don't try to hide that. And that is helping you, because if you did feel like you had to come and put this happy face on or pretend like everything's okay, and I know that sounds kind of wild to think about because you're coming to us to help you, but there are some individuals that haven't broken that barrier yet of getting through that. So I just want to applaud you on that, because I know it's challenging to express what is going on, and I think you do a really good job of being like open and honest and giving us all of the information. So thank you for that. It just helps us help you even more.
Thank you. Thanks.
I now have another thing to add, because Chelsea's correct in that, like, because our job is, you come to the gym and we start working out. Like, we're doing what I have that day for you then. So for you to show up and tell me like, oh, I'm really sore, or, oh, like I'm really tired, allows me to then relook at the workout and have to adjust anything if I need to. And if like you were to not to tell me that, then I can't do that. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah. Actually kind of sore right now, Sophie, just so you know. From our workout.
I meant to text you. I'm sorry.
But you're fine.
What did you guys do? What did you work on Tuesday?
Stupid pull-ups. I'm telling you.
Oh my God. We did pull-ups and we did hip thrusts because Molly wanted to work on those a little bit more, actually in the middle of half marathon training. And I had to tell her, like, we got to reel it in. We can work on that a little bit after. And yeah, those were the two main events, pull-ups and hip thrusts.
Yeah. My arms, that's what I'm saying. Like my arms, I was like holding my work bag. I was like, Jesus.
I love it. I love it.
Well, Molly, thank you so much for your time tonight. Chelsea and I greatly appreciate it. You are a star A+ client.
Thanks for having me. It was fun to reminisce on all the good times.
Always here if you need anything. And that goes for everyone else listening. Never hesitate to reach out, ask any questions. Chelsea and I wanted to let you know we will be having some fun joint offerings together in a couple months.
I know. I'm super excited. We are working really hard behind the scenes to share something new with you guys over the next 1 to 2 months, because as you guys saw from this podcast, we have had lots of success when we have worked with mutual clients. We just want to offer more support to more of you. So keep your eyes out for a special offering to come, and we'll chat more in the next month about it.
Looking forward to it.